Let me.
I didn't see in the staff report where it mentioned an increase.
So home preschools for 9 children. So it was 9 before. Oh, but here's one that says, so permitted use it was 9 children, and conditional it was up to 14. And now it'll just be permitted up to 14.
Okay.
So.
Mayor, I'd move that we approve ordinance 2018-30, amending the preschool standards as discussed and as changed by John on the screen.
Been moved by Councilman Swanson to approve the ordinance to amend the preschool standards, ordinance number 2018-30.
Second.
And second by Councilwoman Stoker. We'll begin the voting with Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next item is a public hearing to receive comments on amendments to the fiscal year 2018 and 2019 budget. Presenter will be Evan Nilsson and John Call.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We have several amendments to the current fiscal year budget that we would like to propose. This is a collection of amendments proposed by various departments across the city. I'll just walk through the proposals. I'm going over the staff report that was included in the packet. First are some changes in the general fund. $1,500 donation to Weber Communities That Care Coalition, as discussed by the council. And $10,000 added to the budget for the Employee Education Assistance Program. This was also discussed by the council.
And sorry, Evan, so just as a quick update, we have received 3 applications from employees for that, and anticipate at least 1 more. So that's why we increased it from 4 to 10, as discussed in the meeting when the council considered whether we should fund this program this year. And just as a reminder, they're only qualify for up to 50% of the cost for their classes. And so the idea would be I think we'll set a deadline, and then whoever gets their applications in by that deadline, they would be considered, and then the money would be divided up amongst them. So these classes are typically geared towards individuals in leadership type training, business degrees, things that would help and benefit the city and help these individuals possibly take over some of our supervisors and department head roles. So, sorry, Evan.
Nope, that's great.
So John and Evan, real quick, this money this 10,000 isn't for individual in the city who's going to go through like the police academy. That's a different.
That's a different that if there is a sponsored person through the police one, that would come out of salary lines.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're proposing to add $1,000 for the youth city court for training. 2008-28 for our building contract, which is the increase for the new contract after we bid out those services recently. And an additional $21.57 for the justice court judge salary and benefits. And so those changes that I've just listed out are to be covered using sales tax revenues. We're proposing to increase the sales tax estimate. Our original estimate for sales tax revenue is 3.9% higher than the actual revenues from last fiscal year. This change will put that at 4.53% higher than actual revenues from last year. I'm comfortable with that. I think right now we're at about 8% higher, but we've only had 2 months of numbers, so I think we're okay. We're still pretty conservative with that number.
And council, just to make it clear, it's not that sales tax or any other tax revenues are being increased. We're just seeing a trend where we're receiving more sales tax money. And so Evan's comfortable with the gap between what we're currently seeing and what we're still estimating at the revenues of 4.5%.
Any questions on that section? Okay. We'll talk about some more general fund proposals. These are not funded through sales tax, but other means. So a $200 donation to the community band. We just wanted to add that into the budget because it came about after the budget had been approved. $7,500 increase to the professional services expense line in the building department, and this is for third-party inspections and plans review. That'll be funded through building permit revenues. An additional $8,420 to the beer tax expense. This is money that we received last fiscal year, but it was unexpended at the end of last fiscal year, so we wanted to roll that forward. We're proposing $19,000 to replace the rifles in the police department, and we're proposing to use general fund balance for that purchase.
Council, on that one specifically, if you wanted to go into greater details after public comments on exactly what that was going to entail, I think that the chief and administration would suggest that discussion be done in a closed session. The idea being that we can do a closed session where we're talking about deploying security measures, including talking about the capabilities of our police force. And so if you'd like more details, we're happy to discuss that. We just would like it to be in a closed session so we don't lay out to everyone who's looking to do nefarious deeds exactly what they'd be facing should they do bad stuff in North Ogden City. So
maybe we should let them know what they'll be facing.
Okay. We're proposing $12,000 to purchase a new lawnmower in the Parks Department. We normally have tried to include this in every budget, but it was left out during the last budget process. And then we're proposing $9,600 for 2 additional police grants, and that would be funded through an increase in grant revenue. So that's all for the general fund. Any questions on the general fund? Okay. Next, we'll talk about the capital improvement fund. We're proposing $10,000 for the police department evidence room remodel. That project, I believe, is complete now. Is that right, John? Or is that?
Yes.
Okay, so that one's complete. It's kind of been underway for a while. We're also proposing $13,979 for continued work on the animal shelter. That's been mostly done, but we're proposing to roll forward the $13,979 from the previous fiscal year.
Evan, the evidence room remodel, much of that was done in-house, correct? If not all of it?
I think all of it.
All of it done in-house?
yeah. Most of that $10,000 was the lockers that were purchased. That essentially it's a pass-through, so the wall becomes lockers that open on both sides. And once they shut from the police officer side, only the evidence room technician can open them on the opposite side of the room. So it's an evidence control measure that is the standard in the industry now. Sorry, and just one other clarification. Whenever we're talking about the rollover, specifically like with the capital improvement fund, with the garbage can building, that the state is making us build to keep the rain off our garbage cans. Sorry, I didn't mean that for that to sound the way it did.
It sounded appropriate.
The idea was we had budgeted $70,000 last year. The building wasn't done on July 1st. We thought it would be, so we need to roll the money that we didn't spend that stayed in the capital projects fund to this year, meaning it's been sitting there. We just need to get the authority to spend it. So, yeah, if that is clearer than it already was, I guess it's probably pretty clear already. So.
Next is the Barker Park Amphitheater. This project is also tracked in the Capital Improvement Fund, but it's kind of in its own section. So, as you remember, we eliminated the budget for the amphitheater in June when we adopted the final budget. And so we're bringing this back to the council to consider in preparation for an application to RAMP for funding, for grant funding. So what we're putting in the budget is an expenditure of $756,414. $56,414 of that is what was remaining at the end of last fiscal year and is to be rolled forward into the current year. And then $320,000 of that $756,000 is anticipated to be paid for using the RAMP grant, and then $436,414 would be the city's contribution to the project and would be funded using park impact fees. Last fiscal year, the city received $458,952 in park impact fees, so the $436,000 seems like a reasonable number. The expenditure on this would be contingent on the RAMP grant funding, except for the amount that we were proposing to be rolled over from the previous fiscal year. John, I think you also had some more comments on if we didn't want to approve the full amount, what your minimum hope was.
So, council, this is a spreadsheet I put together to finish the entire interior build out, which includes all the lights that are recommended by our theatrical consultant and the sound systems and all that stuff. Is this roughly $1.1 million? In talking with the Parks Department and the individuals in the industry, we can rent most of our lights as well as speakers for each performance. So if we're not doing a lot of performances, it makes more sense right now to rent that equipment. So I've eliminated those two items here and the audio systems, the theatrical equipment. So that brings us down close to the $700,000 that we're talking about this year. Also, in talking with Wadman, I think that there's been some other areas we think we can do some additional savings to make up that $5,000 difference. If the council, or if we aren't awarded a RAMP grant and we don't get that $320,000, my recommendation to the council would be that we still install the fire sprinkler as well as the electrical systems and a bathroom. And so that's what this total is here, the roughly $260,000 is to get all the lights in the building, all the outlets and everything so people can plug in rented equipment, as well as a functional bathroom and the sprinkler system. And it would also, in that electrical budget, there's some money for the curtains, though technically they would fall under theatrical equipment, but that $150,000 is a fairly flexible number, meaning we could probably forego some items, maybe a couple outlets here and there to get the legs, the curtain, so people can't see the back walls of the stage. And what we would recommend is, in any situation, if the council approves this, is that once the amount's been authorized, then we can authorize our contractor and our CMGC, our management contractor, to actually go out and get bids, so we can dial these numbers in a little closer. It's really hard for us to ask them to do that now, because they would be asking for bids for stuff that would be spent in 6 months, and they wouldn't get firm bids from their subcontractors, and most subcontractors wouldn't want to provide them those bids, knowing that it was speculative. So that's why we're talking about that number will be refined, and the final scope will be brought back to the council for a final approval after we know if the ramp grant is going to be approved or not. So that's the current plan. In my staff report, I gave a little more detail on what each of these Division 1, 7, 8 through, what they each break out to be. Do you have any questions about those? I know that one thing that, for example, the finishes, I didn't realize that was all the walls and the sheetrock and everything. I thought it was something else. And the other one that kind of I had a question about was specialties. Specialties are anything that's bolted to the wall that you'd see in a commercial bathroom, mirrors, toilet dispensers, paper towel dispensers, those kinds of things. And this is actually 24,000 might seem a little high, except for there is a large bank of lights and walls in the dressing rooms for people to change and do makeup in front of. So that's the type of stuff we've done as we've been talking with the contractor to find out, like, why are we spending $24,000 on specialties? And as soon as you add up all those big mirrors and stuff, it adds up quite quickly. So, but there again, we bring back better detail as we after we know if we get the ramp grant or not, and know the full scope of the project. But we, just so you know, even if the grant folks don't give us a grant, I still would recommend the 25 or the 260,000 for what I would call safety, plumbing, lighting, and fire sprinklers. And this fire sprinkler system we're recommending is a little more expensive than a normal one. It's a dry system. It costs about $10,000 more, but it eliminates the need to heat the whole building in the wintertime because it won't be full of water. We'll only have to heat the riser room. And I'm sure Ryan could tell you more about that. So.
What does it use? Halcyon?
What's that?
What does it use?
It's dry.
It's dry. It's air.
It's just air?
Yeah. There's a compressor on the
And,
wall.
and then when the fire goes, the water gets in there.
Come up to a new fire station. I'll show you a dry system.
Yeah. Deal. Fine lunch.
Yep. Okay.
Any further discussion on the amphitheater proposal? The next is the water fund. We had some remaining money in the capital projects budget from last fiscal year that we're proposing to roll forward. $7,500 for grouting PRV stations in order to make that project happen.
And council, when we talked about this project and the council approved the contracts for it, there probably will be some carrying costs, meaning we'll expend the money for the construction to start, and then FEMA reimburses us a month later or a month and a half later. So there will be some lost interest expense, but I think, as was mentioned by one of the residents, they've been hoping for this basin to go in for 2 decades now or more. And so I feel from staff, as we discussed, it's a minor cost to the city or a minor loss of interest revenue. I think the PTIF account we only get 1.5% or less on anyways, as mandated by the state. So it's a fairly low risk account, so we're not losing a lot of interest revenue. Is that correct, Evan?
The rate is going up, but
Well, that's true.
it's still not that high. Okay, the final proposal is in the motor pool fund. I already mentioned the lawnmower. To purchase the lawnmower, we actually buy it in the motor pool fund with money transferred in from the Parks Department. So that is the summary of proposed budget amendments. I provided you with a more detailed listing of budget accounts, so you can see what the original budget was, the proposed amendment, and the difference with little notes. And then in order for the council to approve these changes, we prepared an ordinance that has each account number, account name, and the amended budget amount that we would propose for your approval tonight. So that's all I have, unless you have any questions for me.
Does the ordinance have anything in there about the exception with the Barker Park way, depending on the grant and stuff, or is that?
So the ordinance includes the amended budget of $756,414 for the amphitheater. Is that what you're asking?
Well, no. So if we don't get the grant, is that mentioned? I didn't see that mentioned in the ordinance or anything. You talked about if we didn't get it, we'd have to. Would we have to revisit it if let's say we approve this ordinance, and then if we didn't get the grant, would we have to revisit it at that time?
You wouldn't have to if you trust the staff. We would, not spend the money if we didn't get the grant. If you would like to revisit it, we're certainly happy to do it.
Anything that amount of expense requires the mayor's and mine and Evan's signature to approve. And so it is what Evan says. I think it's, if you think that the three of us and our commitment to bring it back to you before any of that is spent, well, that $56,000, remember, that's rolling over to finish it after last year. So that will be spent, in fact, it technically has been spent because it was part of the original contract from last year with Wadman. It'd only be that $750. We will bring back the additional details before it's been done. And I think the purpose of that discussion will be for the council to say, yes, we do think, for example, that mirrors in the dressing room are a higher priority than this other type of project or something. So, but if you'd like some language added, we could add some language that says the actual expense will be approved by the council. If that's what you'd like to do, Councilman.
Or if the grant is denied, then we could put something in there that says we come back to the council for further direction.
I like what Carl's saying. I don't think it's a matter of distrust. I think it's a matter of it's our responsibility to take care of those funds. And if the grant is denied, then I think it ought to come back for discussion. We ought to look at what are we going to do and where's the money going to come from. That is what you were saying, right, Carl?
I just want to make sure that, that's what's in my head. I may not be able to say it, but I can think it.
Just want to make sure we're on the same page.
And one other comment along those same lines, Council. In my staff report, I mistakenly said we were using general fund money for the amphitheater expenditure. And Evans is the correct one. It is impact fee money. And just as a further clarification, we cannot use impact fee money to replace the existing bathrooms, right. Meaning it has to be a new type of a new facility or an expansion. So if the bathrooms at Lowman View Park were being replaced and they were being doubled in size, in theory we could use half the money could be impact fee money, but the other half would need to be general fund money. And so that's why the money is not always in the same pot as we're talking about it. So Evan's staff report's correct. Mine was wrong.
That's why you're not the finance director.
That's why I'm not the finance director and don't want to be.
Other questions for Evan or John? Okay, we'll open it up for public hearing. Receive comments from the group regarding these proposals.
Brett Hamblin, 963 Deer Meadows Drive. My main input or recommendation is that the expenditures at this point be minimum to make the current facility usable. And what I mean by that, I was here at the council meeting where the lady from Parks and Recreation said she couldn't rent it out or didn't feel she could because it was basically unsafe, and I didn't catch all what, lighting and so forth. But whatever the minimum it takes to make it usable, and then the more, it'd be nice to have things later on once it proves that it's really going to be used and for what type of events and so forth. And that being said, in looking at the stuff, and like John was commenting about, he had a more detailed list. I don't know if it's anywhere. If there's an existing system in place, it's well hidden. I haven't seen it, but I personally would like to see some sort of security cameras, if not security system, as part of what's put in as a minimum today type of thing, so we don't get anything destroyed on what we already have without hopefully seeing who did it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good suggestion. Thank you.
Julie Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. I spent quite a bit of time going over this particular proposal today, and you've actually answered some of my questions, or Evan and John did, as they were talking. So I appreciate that, so I don't have to be up here for the next hour and a half. Just joking. One of the things I would like to bring up is that I feel like if we don't get the ramp funds, it needs to be brought back. This is public money that you are using, and we as a public have a right to hear how you're going to use it, what it should be used for, and to have some input into whether that's a feasible thing or not. So I just wanted to bring that up. I did have one question on the Justice Court judge salary and benefits. I couldn't find any record of where that was discussed, so I was kind of wondering at some point if someone could let me know that. There's no real, it's not like a big deal. But I did notice that the budget from last year and this year in the judicial is up by over $2,000. Is this an additional $2,000 on top of the changes that were made from last year's to this year's budget? Okay, so it is an additional piece of money. Okay, thank you. I tried to find what a beer tax expense was, because I was like, what, you guys have beer parties or something? But I had heard somewhere where, that's what I thought. I'd heard somewhere where it relates to something else. But it would be kind of nice to know exactly where that shows up and how it's used. That was one of the things that I'm finding hard, is when you are putting the budget information out there, it's just like a statement. There's not a breakdown. There's not some information, which as a public member, I would like to be able to understand it. I understand, Evan, you do a great job, and I'm not in any way, but there is so much that we as the public have a hard time understanding, and it's our money that you're spending. So the other one that I had my concerns about was $19,000 to replace rifles at a police department. I have to wonder what you're doing with your rifles that we have to replace them. That is an awful lot of money for rifles, and I hope they aren't using them incorrectly. Or I did have some concerns with a closed meeting. I understand John's point of view, but I think there needs to be some clarification for we the public. And I'd like to know how many rifles that will actually replace. So just put that on, Also on the police grants, I'd like to know, it just says police grants. It doesn't say what the grants are going to be used for. Again, a little more clarification would help. It sounds like the evidence room is done. I didn't realize we had to have an evidence room. I didn't know that we really did those kind of deals here. Most of the felonies are handled by Weber County, not by North Ogden. We turn everything over to Weber County. Of course, I don't understand the police department, but it sounds like it's all done. And if it's all done, we spent money that we didn't have on something beforehand, which kind of bothers me a little bit. If we spent $10,000 more than what we should have, if it was done in-house, and then all of a sudden we have a $10,000 PO that has come to the city, it should have actually been dealt with, I think, much sooner than this one. The animal shelter, I didn't have a problem with. I didn't have any problems with the water fund. I did have a question on the White Rock Debris Fund. It says that the $874,000, whatever, is being provided by FEMA grant. Again, have we been given this money yet? Has the FEMA grant been granted? That was just my question. Has it been?
Yes.
Yeah.
I told the council, I think last meeting, that we had received official word. It has been
Approved.
final approval.
Okay.
Yep.
That was the only question I had. And then it comes to the Barker Park Amphitheater. As I went through this budget, I have a question for you. As I went through the individual numbers, we have $56,414 that is being rolled over. My question is why was that not used for fire suppression last year when the building was actually used? How come we didn't have any kind of fire suppression in the building if we had money in the budget? So that is a question that needs to be, I would like an answer to. Some point you can email me. You guys all know my email. And so you're more than welcome to do that. But that did kind of bother me that we didn't have any fire suppression for an event that had hot lights, very flammable costumes. I did not attend the production. I am not in favor of spending as much money as we are going to spend on the amphitheater. So that's why I broke it down. So we're getting $320,000, we hope, from a ramp grant. It seems like we live on hope in this city, in the hopes that we get it, and just because we've had it for the last 2 years does not necessarily mean we will get it this year. So it said that we were doing matching funds. Well, when I worked it out, when I broke everything up, there's actually $60,000 that is not accounted for. We're actually putting $380,000 to match the grant fund, and I would like to know why we didn't just put $320,000. So the city itself had over $4 million in grants and donations last year. So that is a heck of a lot of money. And again, we have no idea where this grant money went. It's kind of become my big thing. So I would really request that we do a little more breakdown for the amphitheater. If you want my opinion, I don't think that we should spend any more money than we have to spend. I would personally like to see it just sit as it is. We don't have any plans in place to actually use this facility. We don't have any structured fees. We don't have any plans. And so we're spending a lot of money on a building that could very well sit empty. It's already been stated that we most probably will not do a play this coming year. So the only thing that will happen there is July 4th. And I may not be liked very much for this comment, but I am going to say this. I appreciate Brent Taylor's service. I appreciate what he did for this city. But it seems to have been, a lot of people believe that his death united this city. I do have to say, I don't believe that is what happened. We who were opposed to some of the plans that were in place before he left, out of respect for the family and for what was happening, we have been quiet. But I believe that we need to make sure that we build this, we spend the North Ogden Citizens Residents' money. And so I've heard that there is a petition going around to rename the amphitheater, and I don't believe out of respect for the Barkers we should do that. It should stay the Barker Park Amphitheater. I'm sure we can find other ways. We have a war memorial down by Lee's, that, for all our soldiers and stuff. So this is, for me, I would just like to say that I believe it didn't unite the city as people believe it did. It was put in the newspaper today that it did. And as we start moving forward, we have to move forward. And as you know, my face will be here if I don't agree with something. And this amount of money on an amphitheater is a huge amount of money based upon the fact that possibly we could get a grant. And so I would ask that maybe if you are going to pass a budget amendment to this, that it be truly not including the ramp fund money or any additional monies that you maybe possibly could get from that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Glad to see you're upright.
Yeah, Been there most days, thank you. Sean Casey, 2444 Barker Parkway. To make a few assumptions. One, the amphitheater was properly vetted and placed in an appropriate spot. With that said, I agree with all views so far stated, save one general supposition, and that is that we want you to entertain us. There's nothing further from my mind for that to be used for a government-sponsored event facility, no matter where it would be. So I'm going to continue to work on the supposition that it was properly planned, engineered, vetted, and built. Our founding principles, the preamble that you all have sworn to uphold and protect, the Bill of Rights that you have all sworn to uphold and protect, are in question with how we're proceeding with a presupposition that the city will entertain us. We have a city band. I think that's crazy. I think that goes against the founding of this enlightened government that we're enjoying. And there's been a lot of sacrifices from the founders and all that went before them in the Enlightenment movement. The hundreds of thousands of people have died for the right to pursue property, happiness, and the right to have the free exchange of ideas. So we are building a really high-performance vehicle for the free expression of ideas. You should consider this, and what this means, what this is going to mean to all of us. You're spending our money, you're spending your own money, but you're also spending Weber County's money. And if you've ever been in business with partners, they're going to come at some point and say, we want some stuff. We want to do it this way, we want to do it that way. So my suggestion, and I'm only going to offer one suggestion, is that you rip the transformer out, because you have a 400 amp dedicated service for a facility that will definitely handle as big a production as you want to put on. Big as anything in Salt Lake save USANA. It's the biggest amphitheater in our state except for the massive complex of USANA. The Gallivan Center has a 100 amp service in the middle of Salt Lake City, which is used all the time. If we remove the transformer and we restore it where it's at, again, I'm moving off of my my original assumption. So we have it built in the Barker Park, which is stated to be a passive park in a lot of documents, including documents that have been applied for at the state level, and we've received money on those documents. So we're inviting pushback from a lot of places with our amphitheater. You're inviting it from me as a person who will not stand to tell me, for you, an oracle of decision makers, that my tone is not proper. My beat can't be played in this amphitheater. I will not stand for this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening. I am Peggy Barker at 2553 North Fruitland Drive. First of all, I didn't hear my brother's comments earlier, so hopefully I don't cause a schism by what I might say. I am delighted to see this back on the budget after it had been approved before and removed, if only because we have a shell of a building, and inside where the bathrooms would be are pipes in the floor. That it seems we've gone this far, we've started this. We need to make something that's usable. We need to make something that we can begin to rent out, that we can have performances there, that we don't need chemical toilets in the back. I was expecting about a month ago, waiting for Mayor Taylor to return, thinking, well, should I give him a week or 2 weeks? before I show up and say, okay, it's time to work this out. We have the amp, let's do it. What do we need? He did say to me, once we get the amphitheater, people will be there. They'll look across the hill and start asking questions about the rest of the park. And at that point, we could start talking about the rest of the park, the other 34 acres, and we could begin to build. We could begin to get interest. And so I'm still looking forward to that. I am disappointed that Mayor Taylor will not be here working with us physically, though I hope that he is here with us spiritually, helping to guide us as we work through this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and suggestions.
My name's Calvin Pack. I live at 3185 North, 1250 East. And I wasn't going to talk about the police budget, but we don't like change, but we also have to progress. And so to that, I think we just can use some language in there in a future meeting that won't expose exactly what we have as far as armament or training or anything of that nature, but we could say that maybe we had upgrades in our weaponry or upgrades in our tactics, something like that, so that the public will know that, you know, we do mean well when we say we have to spend some money in our police department. We have different types of crime now than we used to have 30 years ago. And so our police have to have different methods to handle that. So I'm nothing against the price that that's going to cost us. I just think that even though it's going to be a closed meeting to the public, we could say we spent a certain amount in upgrades. We had to spend a certain amount in replacing used equipment, or we had to spend extra money in another place. We could just give that out in them figures in a maybe a more private way, but let us know that the money was necessary for certain things. As to the amphitheater, and I haven't followed it super close, but it seems to be the biggest topic in North Ogden for the past couple of years. And was there an estimated total cost for the complete project at the beginning? Because it seems to me like what I'm hearing is, I heard figures when it first started, a little over $1 million. Now I see that we've got to do $756,000 more. And this is only just part of it. There's going to be more on top of this coming to us, I suspect. You know, with a big production in there, where's everybody going to park? Has that been put out for people, what that's going to cost to the public? And where's it going to be? How's it going to affect the neighborhood? Because earlier we were talking about, you know, having in-home businesses in a residential area and the impact of having too many cars transfer in and out. The same thing here. You've got a facility in a residential neighborhood again, and so you're going to have a lot of people having to come in and out. And I know if I lived on Barker Parkway, I wouldn't want to have to come home and not be able to get in my driveway because there's no room to park. I wouldn't want to have to put up with a bunch of noise. And then somebody mentioned on there that when productions come, they'd be happy to clean up. I don't know if this has been discussed. Maybe I'm talking to the wrong people on this, but if somebody rents the facility, there should be a cleaning deposit maybe. Because that's another question that people talk to me about day to day is, man, people sure are filthy. They leave their cups, they leave their popcorn just in the parking lot because they don't want to put it in their cars. Maybe them questions have been asked. As Mrs. Barker said there, yeah, it's here. We have to see how we're going to make it all work now. And we have to keep moving forward. I did hear council members say that if we don't get the ramp funds, we do need to revisit this. I strongly agree with that. Something needs to be put in place tonight before you make a motion, that something is said to the effect that we will revisit this if the ramp funds don't come. We've got ramp funds in the past, but maybe now they might say we have another project somewhere else that's going to be more important than the amphitheater. So I respect that we want to reserve that opportunity to not spend $380,000 based on hoping that we can get together. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Hi, I'm Mona Lisa Wall, 2457 North, 750 East. I have been doing some research on amphitheaters around Utah, and I've gathered some information that I'd like to submit tonight to the City Council. And I just have a little packet here. I am willing to help with fundraising. I am willing to help in any way that I can to ensure that the amphitheater is a safe and family-friendly asset to our community. I am not afraid of the amphitheater, and I'm not afraid of bringing in the beauty of the arts to this beautiful area. So I want to invite everybody to take a look at what I brought and to consider the ideas of what other cities are doing that are successful. And I want to ensure that we do get the ramp, and I'm confident that we will. And I don't see why we wouldn't, because the amphitheater is an important project, and especially with Mayor Taylor passing away, I don't see Weber County refusing a ramp grant to North Ogden City. So we've heard if we don't get it, probably a dozen times already. I believe we will get it, and I'm confident, and I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to reach out to ramp, and I'm going to ask them to please give us a special consideration, and I'm going to ask all my friends to. And there are a lot of people in this city that are very supportive of this amphitheater, and I want you to know that we all want to see it succeed. Nobody wants to see this amphitheater sit vacant and unused. That's not why it was built. It was built to bring beauty to our community and to bring us together. And it is beautiful. And I do hope we name it after Mayor Taylor. I think he deserves it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Chelsea Nelson, 3202 Holiday Drive. I know I got up earlier, but I have things. So, first of all, I want to point out I would also be willing to help, and but primarily with performances, things of that nature. I know there are a lot of paid theater teachers in the area, and their salaries may be a consideration of things as things go forward. Technically, I'm not a college graduate, but I have been doing theater for 27 years, and I'm very successful at it. And I've been a director, musical director, things of that nature. I'd be willing to help. And I was in the play this summer. I was in the horribly dark steam room that we call the dressing room, and participated in everything that went on. And even though, ideally, full mirrors, blazing lights, air conditioning, all of that stuff, ideally, I get it. However, it can be done if we just get it safe. So if we don't get ramp money, I still hope it gets approved to come up to safety and come up to a place where we can do basic performances until it proves itself to the community as a positive facilitator of this coming together. And while I appreciate that some people feel that it doesn't bring people together, I was in the cast of 180 people. It was actually like 160, but then we had crew where we did come together. I had family members who were being torn apart by this, and we did come together. And there were 2,400 roughly attendees who also felt we came together. And someone made a comment on one of the Facebook pages as we were talking about we should name the amphitheater after Brent. Someone made the comment that perhaps it could be called the Gold Star Theater, in honor of all those veterans who have lost their lives. And it would be wise to give it a new name because there is also a Barker Park, I believe in Layton, and I know there's one in Pleasant View. So to differentiate the area, a future name would probably be helpful at some point, although that's not the topic of this. And as she said, an empty shell does no one any good. It would be like my parents' garden, where they couldn't decide what to do with it, so now it is an eyesore and a problem, a thorn that sits between them always. So my feeling is that it does bring people together. The money, as it has been said, has to be spent on improvements and expansions. I believe this is a good one that can be used in a multitude of ways, not just a huge production once a summer. I believe there are other ways to use it, including children's theater, improv classes, a Shakespeare in the Park, which would cost far less than a musical because there's no rights to pay for. Things of that nature. I believe there are many, many solutions to make this viable as money is put towards it. So, yeah, and I really agree with the having a responsible vetting rental process. I know that has been a problem at the Ogden City Amphitheater, and as well as security. I would hope that there are things in place for that as well, especially a cleaning deposit. So, yes, thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Kim Christensen, excuse me, 2428 Barker Parkway in North Ogden, Utah. Sorry. My emotions have been this way for about a year now. But my husband asked me, he had to leave for a meeting, and he asked me to please stand and read a letter to you that was sent to all of you through email today. Didn't know if you had a chance to read that. But he asked if I would please stand and read that for you. So, it says, Dear Mayor Chugg and council members, tonight your agenda includes a proposed amendment to the 2019 budget. I am writing to ask you to consider a couple of points as you discuss and vote on the amendment. It likely comes as no surprise to you that my greatest concern is with the additional allocation of funds for the amphitheater. Please consider the following. Sorry. 1, any financially sound decision should be based on good information. We do not yet have that good information, as we've listened to council discussions regarding the amphitheater. The most recent reports were that a couple of people were deciding that the wish list is to flesh out the amphitheater, is for fleshing out the amphitheater. Yet, we still do not have a plan for how the amphitheater will be run, what it will be used for, etc. Without a plan in place, how do we know where the funding should be directed? In this ruling for the city, or number 2, in his ruling for the city, Judge Hyde cited testimony from Tiffany Staley that this facility will only be used for local events, recitals, plays, receptions, etc., and no large outside concerts productions will be brought in. He further stated that there was no evidence that the city intended to charge admission to events at the amphitheater. The city council and leadership have made no effort to correct that statement. So we are left to assume the judge's statement was correct, although admission was charged for the play. 3, Before spending more money on the amphitheater, a plan should consider what the annual cost and upkeep will be and how the city will mitigate those costs. For example, what will a piano teacher be charged to rent the facility for a recital? If it costs taxpayers $300 to staff and equip the facility for an event, we cannot charge $50, or you are requiring all the citizens of North Ogden to subsidize someone else's piano recital, wedding reception, etc. If the council's intent is for citizens to subsidize these events, I suggest you have a responsibility to be open about that and let the community know how much we are spending on each event. Please remember, too, the costs include everything from staff wages, benefits, property tax, equipment purchases, repairs, utilities, and all other costs associated with the facility. If the council will gather information and endorse a well-researched plan prior to spending additional funds, this may help alleviate some of the anxiety regarding the facility. Currently, we do not know what the city's intent is. The council has declined to put anything in writing, with the acknowledgement that we don't know the best use for the amphitheater yet. However, continued spending on the amphitheater leaves us bouncing around, wondering if the council will adhere to their stated desire to minimize impact on the surrounding residential neighborhood, or if we should expect nightly events that intrude into our lives for the greater good. A plan endorsed by the council would at least allow neighbors to know what to expect and would allow citizens to consider if they agree with the direction our leaders desire to take us. 5. As a point of clarification, has the Arts and Amphitheater Committee been disbanded? As a council, you appointed Charlotte Ekstrom and me to the committee, this is my husband, remember, early this year. It was well known how I felt about the amphitheater, but I was told different opinions were needed on the committee. At the first meeting, it was made very clear that we were to stick to the agenda and not have any controversy in discussion. At that meeting, I accepted an assignment and planned to report as requested. We met that one time and have not met yet since. I asked Tiffany Staley when we would meet again and was told they were handling things at the city level. The Arts and Amp Committee is also no longer listed on the state's public notice website. Citizens believe there is an active Arts and Amp Committee, and if this is not true, this misconception should be corrected. I look forward to your addressing these points in budget discussion tonight. Thanks. Aaron Christensen. He also added down here the irony of the discussion on traffic affecting residential neighborhoods and the vision that you have for North Ogden as you were discussing daycare facilities or doing daycare inside of a residential home. One of your bullet points under conformance with the general plan, the vision of North Ogden says, preserve the essential characteristic of a family-friendly community that ensures an enduring legacy, small town, and high quality of life in North Ogden. I find it ironic that you were worried about the amount of traffic a daycare or a preschool would inflict upon a neighborhood. But when it comes to our neighborhood, there's no acknowledgement or concern or real plan. Several of the comments made tonight, I wanted to also address. I am not afraid of the amphitheater either. am mourning the loss of what we came to North Ogden for. A place for my children to run and play, for those other children in the city to run and play and be together. I too have researched and visited many amphitheaters throughout the state of Utah, all the way down to St. George. I've talked with directors and had multiple discussions. As we talked to those at Layton, the director that we talked to there was shocked by what we were doing and didn't know even how we were going to pull it off. Those are saying this is bringing our community together. Well, maybe for you it is, but for others it's ripping us apart. I love performing in plays. I performed in several in high school. And I remember that bonding experience, but I would never force that on somebody else's happiness. Just keep in mind that when you're making your own dreams come true, are you crushing others? You say you want to find out what the uses are for this amphitheater. I hope you can figure that out. But remember the impact that you're having on those that have put their home and spent the money on making it what the city wanted them to make it, and as nice as the city wanted, and as large as the city wanted to make it. We did everything the city asked us to do. And now, I don't even think I can sell my home so that I can go somewhere else, because I won't be able to afford the loss on it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Could you leave Annette a copy of that letter? Thank you.
Dale Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. I hadn't planned to get up and talk, but I just want to emphasize the way I've looked at this amphitheater issue since before construction even began. My wife and I, in fact, attended the Barker Park Committee meetings. We were in all those meetings that the plaintiffs in the lawsuit were accused of not attending. We saw what went on. The one thing that seemed to have been missing all along from the beginning of this was a decent fiscal analysis, a cost-benefit analysis of what it was going to cost us, what it would cost to operate it, what the realistic projected income and expenses were going to be. Being somebody who's worked in private industry all my life, if I had submitted a budget similar to what was used to begin with this project, it would have been rejected outright by my management and upper management. They would have never accepted the things that we were asked to accept. When I look at projected revenues or expenses going forward, one of the things, for example, when we had the play this last year, I have a friend who is an auditor that works for the state and audits all over the United States, very large corporations. He looked at that and he says it's bogus. He says there's a lot of stuff not in there. I would never pass this in an audit. As I looked at one of the things, and I think I put it on one of the popular Facebook pages, and it was deleted immediately, was an analysis of what it costs to bring musical groups into an event that we would put on there. It was maybe 2 or 3 years old. It was shocking what you have to pay to bring one of these musical groups that when this was pitched back in 2016, 2017, before when we talked about the 3 phases, the 2 phases, the 1 phase, what we were going to do, we were pitched that there were musical traveling groups that would want to come to this. What we discovered is it doesn't work that way. When you bring a musical group in, you front them the money. And we're not talking about $10,000 or $20,000. We're talking numbers more like $250,000, $350,000, $650,000. Small groups that you've never heard of start at about $20,000. They don't care whether you have a single individual sit in that stand or not, whether you sell a single ticket. They're paid up front with funds that we have to front, and they don't care whether anybody even sees them perform. Those were the kinds of things we were told there would be a benefit. People would come to our community. I don't know where they were going to spend money to the great restaurants, bars, other entertainment establishments that we have here. The reality is they would come here and go into Ogden. Ogden gladly would love to have had that happen because they would benefit financially and we would be left to clean up the mess. And as we go forward, I look at that. We were up there today with a television reporter, and the report, we missed it. It ran at, I guess, on the 6 o'clock news. And he said the reason he came here, and I think he was going to he tried to interview a couple of you. The reason they have interest in this story is he said people in this state are getting tired of their government spending money on projects like this without a lot of public input and ignoring public resistance to that. He looked at the facility and he said, "What have you guys done here?" He looked at the homes, he looked at the facility, and he said, "This is out of place. I can't believe what you guys have done up here." And he's been here several times over the last couple of years. So as we go forward, I look at that building and I think, it is very possible it would be more cost effective to tear it down than to tear it down than to continue forward and operate it. We have yet, as citizens and taxpayers, been given an accounting of our money. It's not your money, it's our money, whether it comes from the county, the city, or the state, or federal government. It's our money. What it's going to cost and what we're going to make or how much we're going to lose, we don't know that. Are we going to hire a manager at $250,000 like one of the other facilities in the state? So I would just urge you to give us a little more insight into the projected use of this facility, not just an every other year play. That's a pretty darn expensive thing. We could have gone and rented the high school and it would have been a lot less expensive. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, Charlotte Ekstrom, 955 East Deer Meadows Drive. I have a little different perspective. I have lived across Barker Park for, I think, about 13 years now, and most of the time it has sat empty. And I have mourned that I live across the street from a park that nobody goes to. My children have gone over there to find playmates and not found anybody until the amphitheater came in. And now there's a lot more interest and a lot more people coming, and I think that's the purpose of a park. I also knew when I built across the street from property that I do not own, I do not control what goes in there. I believe it was the city's property, and I believe that the city has the right to choose what goes in there. And I was thrilled to have the amphitheater there, and I have really experienced very, very little impact as far as inconvenience, 4th of July notwithstanding, about traffic, noise, or anything else other than hearing beautiful music coming in to my home from the amphitheater, from the musical productions. Last I spoke to Mark Daniels with the ticket sales from the play this summer, it netted about $10,000. And that was with a very limited number of seats being sold and very limited run. So I kind of picture this as the argument that my parents had when my dad started building this house on 1700, which now sits there and is beautiful, and my brother lives in it. But my mom wanted an accounting of every little last thing that it was going to cost. And some things just can't be known. You have a vision and you try and execute it. And some things you just don't know. And you take a little bit on faith that we can come together and make something happen. And that's really what I feel is happening with the amphitheater. I think if we can just have a little faith in each other, have a little faith in what the community wants to see, which I think is mostly going to be local productions. I don't foresee, huge things. Maybe we get the symphony or something every once in a while. But, I don't, I don't know. I can't see. But I do have faith that it can be something wonderful. So I'm one that supports it. And I do know that there are funds available privately, also with other grants. As far as the ramp tax goes, we all pay the ramp tax. It's a sales tax. If we don't want to pay it, we can go buy our things in Davis County and fund their ramp program. But, this is our money. So I really think it's great. And I don't think it's, I thought, wow, how much money am I actually paying to North Ogden City? So I looked on, a larger one and more expensive, and that my taxes for North Ogden City were under $400. And to me, that's just not enough money to be nitpicking all of every line item on your budget. I think I get a good value for that $380 that I spend. And I would really like to continue with the Arts and Amphitheater Committee. I'm hoping that we can, have an arts guild that helps actually get some rules in place. Every amphitheater is going to have a particular set of ordinances, and there are certainly rules that we can put in place that will help ensure that the impact to the neighborhood is minimal. I think just this last production that was done showed that. I really can't see. Maybe I need to talk to my neighbors more carefully about if they were, strongly negatively impacted by having the play across the street. I personally was not, so I enjoyed it. But anyway, I hope you will continue to look at this as a positive. I do think most people in North Ogden, with the exception of a few that are kind of the vocal minority, really support it. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Hello, Council. My name is Penny Dean. I live at 889 East, 2750 North. I just want to say that my concern is the parking. If you expand and you have big productions, there's going to be a lot of traffic. The roads aren't very wide, especially Fruitland Drive is a very narrow road. Also, I was thinking that if you have to have that much money for the ramp to go in and finish this out, the amphitheater is going to sit empty minimum 6 months out of a year. Will be no productions, no money coming in of any kind on it at all. So that's something we need to consider too. It's not something that's going to run 12 months out of the year. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. If there's no other comments, we'll move on to our agenda.
So we need a motion. We need a move to close the public hearing.
It's been moved that we close the public hearing.
Second.
It's seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 12 is discussion or action to consider resolution, Item 11, discussion action to consider ordinance amending the fiscal budget. Presenter is Evan Nilsson, and he has presented. Do you have any other questions from Evan?
So, Council, I put together this language, and I'll just read it out loud for those who can't read it on the screen. It So this is in response to what Councilman Turner was talking about. It says, should the ramp grant not be received by the city, the $320,000 allocated in GL account 5140-750 and I think I wrote that wrong. So that in account 7150, which is money to be received from rent, shall be removed from the budget in a subsequent amendment. Additionally, regardless of whether or not the ramp is received, the council must approve the detailed expenditures on amphitheater prior to any commitment for expenses to any contractor or other entity. I still don't like that first sentence, but is that kind of what you were thinking as an addition to this motion or this ordinance, Councilmember Turner?
Yes.
Let's see. Maybe we should just say
that account should be 4030-110.
Well, but I was going the expenditure and capital projects. Should it be 4040-116?
Yeah.
Okay. So it says should not, if it's not received, the money allocated in 4040-116. I just keep messing up the sentence. Sorry. Should I just say the money shall be removed from the budget? Does that read better? Sorry, I was listening while I was typing, and grammar's hard for attorneys. And so that's the type of language I've added for this, if you'd like to do that, or whatever the council feels is appropriate.
Councilman Swanson.
I'd like to try to address the question about the police equipment in a way that doesn't require a closed meeting.
So can I actually add one other comment on that? So the council can invite anybody they'd like to into a closed meeting. It just turns off the recorders as well as the video. So in theory, you could invite everyone in the room to hear the discussion. It's more about not making it super hyper public. Is that what your thought would be, Chief? Or that's okay with me. So if you wanted to, you could do a closed session. Everyone could stay in the room. It's more about, not that, I'm not sure there's a lot of criminals who are trolling our YouTube page, but
better to do on a Tuesday night.
But maybe it'd be good for you. I'm just trying to give you options.
Let me try that, and then if it's not enough, we could do what you suggested.
Okay.
So essentially, the equipment that we have is Vietnam-era equipment designed for use by the soldiers in Vietnam, not for today's use. It's on loan from the federal government. It's antiquated. It's 40-plus years old, each of them. They're terribly old, and we, in the case of an emergency, we want to make sure, just as you do with fire equipment, we want to make sure that we have equipment that we can count on when that moment arises, and it has to be counted on. The $19,000 would include 19 rifles, one for each officer that we have, and includes the necessary equipment that is required by the police department to have on those weapons. How's that?
Sounds good to me.
Cal, my friend, I'm just trying to answer your question. Yep, without compromising any tactical or anything like that we don't want to necessarily be public.
Thank you.
Chief, did I do okay?
You did great.
Okay. That okay, Julie? Yes. Dale? Yes. Okay. Yeah, 45-year-old pieces of equipment that may or may not work when we need them to.
Let me just point of clarification, just because it's over 45 doesn't mean it's not.
Well, some equipment over 45 doesn't work like it used to, and can't do what it did when it was new. Speaking for myself, we'll stop right there. I'm getting this from.
Stop before.
Okay.
Further questions on the?
I just, question one of the residents brought up, and I wrote it down, but I don't know which one for sure. And I just, maybe from Evan, the beer thing, what was that? The budget for what was it called?
Your license expenditure?
Beer tax expense.
What is that exactly?
So, when people in Utah purchase alcohol, they pay an additional tax on those purchases, and the state collects that money and then allocates it out to cities and counties, and it's to be used to enforce alcohol-related laws. So in our city, we typically use the money to purchase equipment like cameras, or we also use it to pay for additional DUI overtime shifts. So that's what our current practice is. We actually used it to purchase the K9 as well a couple years ago. So we just didn't spend all of the money last fiscal year that we had been allocated, and so we wanted to add that into the current year's budget.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or discussions, council?
Is it ordinance 2018-31? Yes. Mayor, I'd move that we approve ordinance 2018-31 as discussed with the language added by our city attorney in section 2 regarding the procedures used if the ramp grant is not received, and requiring the detailed expenditures to be approved by council before expenses are paid to contractors or other entities.
Motion has been given by Councilman Swanson to approve the ordinance amending the fiscal budget for 2018-19. Ordinance number 2018-31.
So, Councilman Swanson, the way it reads is it's before we commit to incur an expense. So it wouldn't be before we pay it, it's before we even.
And my motion then to say before we commit to make those expenditures.
So it actually would be you'd have to approve it much earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
With that language change?
That's in section 2.
In section 2.
Second.
It's been seconded by Councilwoman Stoker. Any other discussion or questions? Begin the voting with Councilwoman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay, moving on to item 12. Discussion or action to consider resolution amending the consolidated fee schedule. Presenter will be Evan Nelson, our finance director.
I think that's item 13. Is that correct?
13.
Our city planning department has proposed some changes to our fee schedule, and we wanted to present those to the council tonight. The first one is a new fee called subdivision extension. This is a fee that would apply when a subdivision application needs more time. Subdivisions are given a year to complete the process, but if they need an additional amount of time, then a $200 fee would be charged. And then the other one is, sorry, hold on, let me look at this. So the first one I just talked about is in the fee schedule. It's called subdivision application extension. And then the second one is called expired subdivision application renewal. And this would apply when no changes are required to the subdivision, in case laws or standards have changed. So both of these proposed fees are $200. I believe this would be in lieu of charging, instead of charging them the regular fees for a new subdivision. So it's a lesser amount because the subdivisions would already have been in process or even approved at that point. So those are the two proposed fee changes from the planning department. And then also this proposed language that would apply to the entire fee schedule. It says fees may be adjusted in unique circumstances with the approval of the department head and the city administrator. And the planning department recommended that because they encounter unique circumstances from time to time where they felt like it made sense to be able to adjust fees so that the fees charged would be more fair to the applicant. So,
and council, with that one, I think if we wanted to, we could say fees will be reduced. And if you wanted to have the mayor in charge of that, that would be appropriate as well. I mean, the idea is just, and it came up with like this fee renewal or the subdivision renewal. We had an applicant who let their subdivision lapse for 2 or 3 years and didn't do any changes, but our ordinance said we had to charge them $800, and we just didn't feel like that was appropriate. But there wasn't a mechanism to make that happen.
Excuse me, John. Can we limit the sidebar conversations, please? Thank you.
And so the question is, do you think that's appropriate? And if so, who do you want to be in charge of that? If, you know, and I personally, it doesn't matter to me. If you think the mayor should approve it, then I think that's great. If you're okay with it at just the department head level, that's fine too. But whatever you think is
Well, it says department head and city administrator.
Right. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm
fine with the way it's worded myself. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't want mayor to do more than he has to do.
Okay.
So those are the changes that we would propose that you would approve by adopting this amended resolution.
Any other questions for Evan? Discussion from the council?
What's the resolution number?
10-2018.
I'll make a motion that we approve Resolution 10-2018, amending the consolidated fee schedule as presented.
And move that we approve the resolution amending the consolidated fee schedule by, that'd be resolution number 10-2018 by Councilman Barker.
Second.
Second by Councilman Turner. Any other discussion or questions? Can we begin the voting by Councilman Barker?
Yes.
Councilman Turner?
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker?
Yes.
Councilman Swanson?
Yes.
Motion approved. Item 13, discussion or action to consider a full-time employee in administration. The presenter will be Annette Spedlove, our city recorder, HR director, and John Call, our administrator attorney.
Mayor and council, if some of you will remember that a year and a half ago, we combined all the administrative assistants into my department, all the ones from planning and building, everyone came up, and there are 7 part-time administrative assistants, and I've had one out on maternity leave that left in August that is not coming back, and that's good news. She's staying home with her new daughter. And then I have one that has retired in September, I believe the 1st of September, she retired, and she could only work so many hours in a calendar year. Not so many hours, she could only make so much money in a calendar year, and she's met that, so she's gone. Part-time employees is there's not the consistency of having someone there in the office, at least 2 employees all the time in that front office. And we're not always, our building permits, our planning, we have so much more work. So I'm asking that we hire a full-time employee, which I will not replace the employee that is not coming back from maternity leave. That person will not be replaced. And I was opening up in-house, so that means if a part-time employee in my department, and I am aware of 2 that want to apply for this, if it opens up, I will not replace that part-time employee. The cost for the rest of this year to do that will be $1,067. And I didn't ask for that to be put on the budget amendments because I can make that up in my department. The impact to continue this in the years to come, well, next year, in the next fiscal year, will be $12,550. And if you remember, I did have a full-time employee, and we were asked to try this part-time, and it works. But the majority part-time workers, my workers are very good workers. I don't want to say they're not. They just don't have enough time to get their work done. And then we don't have the consistency of people being there when the customers come in. And as the HR director and the city recorder, a lot of my time is taken up too with helping the customer, which I'm hired to do, is help the customer first and foremost. And that's the best part of my job, is to meet the people. But I'm really in need of a full-time position.
So, Council, for security purposes, we try to keep that front office staffed with 2 people, and then there's always typically additional people in the other offices around. Just that was part of the reason we moved the counter from downstairs to upstairs. Is there were several times we'd have 1 person in each space and no one around them, and so we're just trying to limit security issues. So, not that we've had any or expect any, it's just, out of an abundance of caution.
I don't have any issues.
Questions or discussion?
I'm good with it.
Thank you.
So do we just need to approve this?
Yes.
Like to make a motion that we approve this full-time employee in the administration.
It's been moved by Councilwoman Stoker to approve the full-time employee in administration,
I'll second.
and seconded by Councilman Barker. Any questions or discussion? Now we'll begin the voting with Councilman Turner,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Motion approved. Next item is discussion or action to consider a resolution for the disposition of police custody property. Presented will be John Call, our city administrator attorney.
So, Council, every 6 months or so, our evidence room technician, goes through and looks at items that have been sitting in our room for a long time and decides, do we need to keep them? For example, if we have an active police case, then those items are continued to be kept. But in the situation for what we call found property and safe keep property, there's typically items that have no value. We've reached out to the owner several times and they haven't responded, and so we need approval from the council to dispose of them. We do a public notice, give people one last chance to come in and find their stuff, and then we typically throw it away. The one exception to that is typically bicycles and things we end up donating, typically to nonprofit groups, and there's several in the area, and we just rotate them through the groups. I don't believe I saw any bicycles on this list, but you can see there's, if you want, we can keep a tank top, t-shirt, but they're things that are found. They were either found on people who were arrested, or they were just found in a park somewhere, and so it's just a matter of making sure that we, that they go back to the right person. You can see several of these items go back as far as 2010. That's been one of the benefits of the remodel over there in the evidence room, is that there were some items that were found or safekeep property that have been sitting back there for quite a while, and you can see we still actually have the records that show where they came from, who found them, and the case number they're associated with. So the record keeping was good. It's just a couple of items got snuck in the in the corners and didn't get rotated out with the previous years that we've done this. So we have a safe keep list as well as a found property list that have been posted so that people can double check, make sure there's nothing there. Most of the items are not very descriptive, because if someone feels like they've lost a wallet, they should be able to come in and describe the item as opposed to having it specified so that people get a free Velcro wallet. So anyways, if we just need the council to pass a resolution, and then once we hit the time frame, which I believe is set for December 7th for the actual disposal of the items, that's when there or after, or sometime after that, the evidence clerk would actually get rid of them. So, and most of these items will be thrown away. There are some items that specifically will be destroyed. Contraband items, there's pills, pipes, things like that, but they've been kept in case they become part of a criminal case, but they've been there long enough that they won't be. So, any questions about that?
You go back to the safe keep page.
Yep.
Third one down, what is a mirror klosk?
That's what I was wondering. Is that why we keep it so long?
I think it's
2010. We've been trying to figure out what a mirror klosk is. Sorry, had to have a little levity there.
Oh,
Nin wouldn't know that.
Oh, so it's actually not it's not supposed to be clocks. It's a real item, like you pop it
is
open.
a real thing?
Yeah, that's what Annette's saying.
Well, I'm going to go home and
so
Google it.
it pops open and you
There's
have
a mirror in it.
a mirror and
like
makeup
the little
or other
makeup thing?
things, I guess.
Okay, learned something new tonight. Never
So-
mind.
Police officers didn't know that either, so.
Yeah. And occasionally some of these items, for example, the screwdriver, the department will throw in one of the officers' trucks so they have, a screwdriver, and that's the type that we do occasionally keep a few items, which again is part of the purpose of the resolution, is to make an official public statement that we are, this stuff is being turned over or destroyed. So, any other questions?
Mayor, I'd move that we approve Resolution 11-2018, approving the disposition of police custody property as discussed.
It's been moved by Councilman Swanson to approve the resolution for the disposition of police custody property, resolution number 11-2018. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Stoker. We'll begin the voting with Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Motion's approved. Next item, we left the item at the end of our city council for public comments. We would open that up if there's any further comments from the group.
This will be unexpected. Rod Barker, 2524 Barker Parkway. I have a question, and maybe you can't answer the question. Is the time passed for the leaf grabbing machine done?
They're doing it through the end of the week.
As long as it's dry, they're continuing to do it, but they have stopped. For today, they stopped taking addresses because they were so far behind, but I think they're hoping to get back on track by tomorrow. Dave is saying yes.
Okay. I'm happy to hear that because in my drivings around the city this evening, I saw no less than 20 to 30 piles of leaves around the city.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's still going on. Yeah. That was all I had.
Thank you for your question.
Brett Hamblin, 963 Deer Meadows Drive. Two quick points. One, when just a curiosity on, everybody keeps asking all the questions with the budget and so forth. When you approved the new employee and it was going to be $12,000 next year, is that an automatic increase go into the budget? You don't have to readdress that again, do you?
No. It will be programmed into the budget, but in technicality, every position has to be reapproved every year. So we do have typically a set salary budget for each department, and so this will go into that amount.
I wasn't complaining or really asking, it was just kind of nobody said anything. I thought, oh, gee, after all that financial discussion, that's going to throw a wrench in the works when $12,000 is off or whatever. But last question, just a question. When you talk about replacing equipment and you're talking rifles with the police department, what happens to the old stuff?
Go back to the feds.
Does it? Okay, thank you.
You have to give them back.
Thank you.
Not that I know what they're going to do with 45-year-old equipment, but...
You said Vietnam era.
You shoot them.
I need 2 pieces off of Vietnam.
Sorry. Thank you. I just want to take one more minute to show my appreciation for all of you, and especially for the city staff. As you know, I was a city employee for a year and a half during the time Mayor Taylor was there, right before he was deployed. And I know personally that the city does amazing work with such a minimal amount of employees. You can't imagine the stress level and the burden of workload that they have to deal with every single day. Plus, on top of that, take, the customer service and the courtesy and the patience and the effort that they put in to really treat citizens of North Ogden well. And so I have a deep appreciation from the inside of how much these employees put to their work, and they're very loyal. And I really appreciated everything that Annette did for me, and I appreciate everything she does for her employees, and I ask for your support anytime she needs anything in regards to employees and personnel. Please give it to her and approve it, because they need it. And we are growing as a city. We cannot continue to work on a shoestring budget. And I felt a little bad because it seemed like she was begging for, please give me another full-time employee. She needs probably 3 full-time staff. And she deserves it. And she is overworked and over herself. And I don't know, I think she puts in 16-hour days, overall, every day, probably more. Right, Annette? I mean, seriously. And she looks amazing for working as hard as she does. So I think that an appreciation is in order, gratitude is in order. And I want to thank all of you for all your effort and everything you do. Mayor Chug, you've just been outstanding this last year. And I thank you for your just everything. You are a very wise man who I think was put into place at this time for a reason. And you have the characteristics and the mettle that it took to get through everything you've done this year. So thank you. And I appreciate all of you, and have a good night.
Thank you.
And Evan needs a raise. He deserves a raise.
Don't get started, Evan.
I didn't know what I was going to say.
I saw you grinning. I saw the smile.
Hi, I'm Spencer Alexander, 1740 North, 150 East. Rushed over here after work, haven't had dinner yet, so it's kind of hard to be here, but I'm here. So one thing I wanted to talk about, a little bit about talking about the importance of the arts. I'm actually an artist on the side. I wasn't able to make it as a career, so I work very long hours to provide for my family. Years ago, I read a book that talked about how to make a living from art. And one thing I found really interesting is there was a chapter on learning to price your work. And one thing that talked about says, well, how do you price something that you have gained an emotional attachment to, that you have grown from, that is something you created that now you're trying to share? And what's interesting is they talked about it, and they said basically that you had to take the emotion out of the equation because you couldn't put a price on the experience. That art is yours, it's become something with you, but now if you're trying to make a living off of it, you have to say, well, it has to go for such and such dollars, it has to pay electricity, it has to make sure my wife can get a nice new shirt, that the kids can go to school. Now, my worry is with the amphitheater, that the reality of what the arts are wonderful and it's great, but can we properly, within respect to the community as a whole, not the very passionate people who are emotionally, because I get it, it's the arts, they get something from it. You have to separate those two at some point. So from here on out, I hope that's the decision that we make, is based upon, we have this great dream, but what is the reality? Do we have to water it down? Do we have to make changes? That's what needs to happen. Another thing that I think is really important is that we have to understand that when we talk about visions,